techniques. You may call it as focus group interviews or focus group discussions. And there you need to have a group consisting of 6 to 10 members. And the researcher will be facilitating the whole process, and somebody would be noting down the minutes of that particular discussion. And again, I think example is all those candidates who are having this asthma. It may be a school or a class or maybe a society where the people having a problem. That asthma is a problem, and some of the people or the students may be suffering with that, and then you call them to a particular place, telling them the location, the timings for discussion purposes. So I think you can initiate the discussion with regard to this asthma patients. So there's a group of asthma patients, which will also be coming into the fold of these focus group interviews or focus group discussions. And then you can have discussion or the interview or the interaction with those candidates or the persons who are having this kind of asthma problem. Or it may be anxiety problem, or it may be stress problem, it may be some other problem also. That is one of the examples that I can also cite for this particular focus group techniques. Now we are moving into a very important area, that is unit number 19, which talks about the techniques of multivariate analysis. Multivariate analysis. And so far we have discussed with regard to univariate analysis or double variate analysis. When there are one variable or two variables only, we have discussed how to analyze those variables using statistical techniques, if it is quantitative data. So when there is a quantitative research, normally we try to include the variables, and the variables are to be analyzed, and for that purpose, unilateral variables or double variables, that kind of analysis we have seen in the earlier topics, which we discussed with regard to this experimental research and other things, quasi-experimental research. So in those areas, we have mentioned single variable or double variables. Not only up to that point, we have stopped off understanding the analysis process. Now, when there are more than two variables, how to analyze that data. When more variables are included, several variables are included, or more than two variables are included in our research, how to analyze that particular data. That is a concern for today's discussion. So the topic that we are going to discuss is unit number 19, techniques of multivariate analysis. And then under that, you can understand there are so many techniques that are mentioned here. One is multiple regression analysis, multiple discriminant analysis, factor analysis, principal component analysis, multivariate analysis of variance, also canonical correlation analysis, cluster analysis, multidimensional scaling, and conjoint analysis. And these are the techniques which are included for multivariate analysis. We can use these techniques for the purpose of analyzing the data when more number of variables are included in your study. So the data has to be analyzed with so many, when the so many variables are included or more than two variables. We can call it as multivariate. Variate means variance. Variance is possible when there is a variable which is included, isn't it? So variable which varies. So if there are many variables which are included in a study, then how to analyze that particular data when more than two variables are included. The first one is multiple regression analysis. It's very important. Nowadays, people are using it, this kind of analysis. And of course, 80s, or it has come into existence, especially in our Telugu states. The researchers used to apply this kind of multiple regression analysis, which was also used by me in 1987 for my MPhil and also for my PhD thesis. And only a few candidates can use this multiple regression analysis, which is very, very cumbersome kind of statistic. Very tough statistic also. Manually, you may not do it unless You ask computer wala who has knowledge in statistics, he only gives the result. Otherwise, manually doing these things when many variables are included in your research. So therefore, this multiple regression analysis is that it is meant for predicting the variance in the dependent variable. There may be two or three or more than, sorry, not two. If there are more than two variables, independent variables are included, and there may be two or three dependent variables are included, then how all these independent variables could be able to contribute or predict the variance in the dependent variables. Who is on the screen? Usha?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, very good. Yes. So multiple regression analysis is meant for analyzing the data when there are more than two independent variables and maybe two or three dependent variables. Of course, my study, which I took for my MPhil, I included 25 variables. There are 22 independent variables and there are 3 dependent variables. So in order to analyze that particular data, when you are having more than such a number of independent variables and to study their contribution or prediction in the dependent variable, we can use this technique. We can also go into the details of regression means stepwise regression is also there. In each step, how many variables are entering to explain the variance and what is its contribution in terms of percentage, that can also be done. So using this multiple regression analysis, we can understand the prediction in terms of percentage, how much a percentage of contribution is made by the variables. That can be understood by using this multiple regression analysis. Contribution to the dependent variable, how much contribution is made by the independent variable. At each step, how many variables are entering also. When all these variables put together, how much variance is to be explained? When there are 20 variables, independent variables, put together, how much a percentage of variance will be explained by all these variables? That is one part. And the first part is, what is the contribution of single independent variable also to the dependent variable? That means each independent variable will also contribute or it may not contribute. If it contributes, how much it contributes to the dependent variable, that is change or the variance that is explained as a result of the independent variables in the dependent variable. The change that is occurring or the variance that is occurring as a result of independent variables. So therefore, if you go further into this, we can also talk about the stepwise regression analysis. The first one is understanding the contribution of each independent variable. And the second one is how much contribution is made by all the independent variables put together. For that purpose, we can use this multiple regression analysis. Is it clear? I am not very particular about the statistical part because the statistical part is not included here. If you want, you can also mention the formula which is also given in your module at the end. Y is equal to something, it's mentioned. Y means that's a dependent variable. That the dependent variable is the contribution of the independent variables which are mentioned the other ways. Y is equal to something, something, isn't it? There's a formula. If you can mention that formula, there ends the business. Don't go into the problem and then solving the problems of this multiple regression analysis, which are also not included in your syllabi. You just mention only the formula. And what is the concept that you have to talk about or explain in the examination? Concept of this multiple regression analysis is that where more than two independent variables and maybe two or three dependent variables, in order to predict, these are the terms that you have to use, predict, contribute, or influence. Again, my dear friends, whenever you talk about independent variables, we can also different synonyms for that. independent variables, predictor variables. We can also call them as predictor variables. Predictor variables, which predicts the variance. We can call them as predictor variables. So all these predictor variables are, in other words, we can call them as independent variables. Also, we can call them as influencing variables. Influencing variables also, or impacting variables. If the experiment is conducted there, we can call it as impact variables, which impacts. So we can also call them as categorical variables. Categorical variables. If a variable is categorized into different groups, we can call it as categorical variables. Say, for example, your gender. You can also divide it into two, male and female. Am I right or wrong? Then also your literacy, that is another variable. You can also call it as illiterate and literate. You can divide it into two. And also your SES, socioeconomic status. You can also have groups, the high, the middle, and the low economic status groups. Isn't it? So they are all categorical variables where there is no metric kind of thing is added. Metric means measurements or the score. Score is not given there. Am I right? In some cases, the actual age of the candidate can be recorded in numericals. Am I right or wrong? You may divide into groups. Say, for example, from 10 to 15 years, one group. 16 to 20 years, another group. Isn't it? We can also group that particular age. You can have 3 or 4 groups. You can, or otherwise, you can also actual age can also be recorded. Am I right? Say if you are 15, you can put 15. If some individual is 16, you can put that 16 years. So the numerical part of the age will also be recorded for analysis purpose. But somebody was also today morning, I was listening to the speech of one doctor. They are mentioning the biological age. What is biological age? Dr. Naisra Saab is also there, the other side. Chronological age and the biological age. Biological age talks about your body. Although you are 25 years old, but your body and other things related to your body, and you may be only 20 years old. You appear to be 20 years old. That is a biological age. Even though actually your age is about 30 years, but your biological age may be 20 years because your body structure is like that. You appear to be not 60 years. Right or wrong?
Yes, sir.
That you should also consider. So therefore here, my dear friends, when we talk about multiple regression analysis, and this analysis is meant for analyzing the data when there are more than 2 independent variables and also dependent variables, it may be 1 or 2 also, or more than 2 dependent variables too. So in that case, we can use multiple regression analysis. Then we can talk about factor analysis. The factor analysis that is condensing many variables into just a few, condensing many variables. Unlike this, multiple regression analysis, because there are many variables including that, there you are analyzing the contribution of those independent variables. But in factorial analysis or factor analysis, here you are reducing the number of independent variables. Am I right? Naupada Deepagaru.
Sir, listening, sir. Right, sir.
Very nice. Deepaji, now I am talking about factorial analysis or factor analysis.
Sir, you missed multiple discriminant analysis.
I come to that part. Don't worry, I come to that part.
Okay,
It's
sir.
very
Just reminding
simple,
you, sir.
because I'm a teacher. How to teach the students, I know pretty well, because
Yes, sir. You are
we
very,
go
very
from
experienced.
simple to complex.
Okay, sir.
I cannot, introduce the complex kind of thing in the beginning.
Yes, sir.
That's why I'm talking about this factorial analysis, just missing out this multiple discriminant analysis. It's not a great thing also. We can discuss later. Okay. Whatever
Yes,
that is
sir.
very easy for us, we can discuss later. We can discuss those things. Huh?
Yes, sir. Right, sir.
Yes, factorial analysis is meant for reducing the number of variables, which is very cumbersome. Don't make it very complex by introducing many variables. When there are several variables which are included, it will be very difficult for you because the complexity will also increase. In order to reduce that complexity, we can reduce the number of variables. The example is, can anybody come up with an example for this? How to reduce? Say, for example, your socio-economic status is there. That is the factor. So every factor, not every factor, some factors can be classified into variables. For example, your socio-economic status, we can call it as factor. And from that only this factor analysis has come. So your SES is a factor which can be classified or divided into 2 or 3 variables. And those 3 variables are, one is literacy, another is income, still another is occupation, still another is community. Is it clear now? And all these things put together, we can call it as socio-economic status factor. Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Is
sir.
it
Yes,
clear?
sir. Following, sir.
Yeah, very nice. So when you club all these things, literacy, income, occupation, community, can't we call it as socio-economic status?
Yes, sir.
Socio-economic status, society, social issues, economics related to income. When all these things put together, those are literacy, income or occupation. These 3 things put together, we can call it as SES. That means you have reduced the number of variables.
Okay.
Am I right? Clear?
Yes.
So SES is a factor which can be classified into variables, and each variable can also be classified into trait also, but we are not talking about the traits. Here we are talking about the variables. So variable literacy, income, occupation can be clubbed together. We can call it as socio-economic status. So that is one factor. So therefore, instead of 3 variables, you can find a single factor. That means you have reduced the number of variables into one. That is known as socio-economic status. Similarly, in the, of course, business side also, people will talk about consumer behavior. Those people who are connected with this business, consumer behavior can also be classified into different variables. Number of sales, the price rise, price of the product, etc. will put together under consumer behavior. The type of products, also the cost of the product, and also the liking of the product and other things. All these variables can also be clubbed into consumer behavior. We can call it as consumer behavior. Consumer, the fellow who buys, is a consumer. Who consumes. How his behavior would be on different issues. When you want to purchase a product, then you try to see different issues. That thing is known as consumer behavior. So therefore, here what you are doing is, under factorial analysis, you are reducing or condensing the number of variables into a few for analysis purpose, so that the complexity cannot be invited. The next one is the canonical correlation analysis. Canonical correlation analysis. Canonical correlation analysis, it explores the relationships between 2 multivariable or multivariate sets of variables, all measures on the same individual. It explores the relationships between 2 multivariate sets of variables. It explores the relationship between two multivariate sets. Example is exercise and health. Let us try to understand. Unless I quote examples, you cannot understand. That's the reason why everywhere I am citing the examples for each and every issue. Friends, it's okay? So
Yes, sir.
canonical correlation for that, I'm quoting the example of how to analyze that. Exercise and health, these are the two variables. And this is also very close to this factorial analysis. But anyway, let us try to understand this. How the relationship exists between multivariate sets. Multivariate sets. There are many variables in a set. A set means it's a group. A group consists of many variables. Normally it varies. If you take up individuals, their IQs are varies. Their IQs are not one and the same. Am I right or wrong, friends? So any set that may be a multivariate kind of thing when you talk about the human behavior. So therefore, here what you are doing is you are trying to explore the relationships between two multivariate sets of variables. Example is exercise and health. Under this exercise, let us try to understand the various variables. Number one is climbing rate on stepper. When you step on the stair, when you go up the stairs, what would be your, that is one of the exercises. What would be your BP and other things, then we can discuss after this. So the first exercise is climbing the steps. Next one is running a distance. And again, my dear friends, if you go through your module, you cannot understand a single thing also because very complexity. Your module. You can't
Yes, sir.
because something it brought somewhere and just pasted. Proper explanation, proper examples are not there in the module. That's the reason why please try to go to the internet, which you feel convenient for you, especially for this one. That's the reason why I'm
Okay.
just avoiding. I'm just avoiding this particular portion of seeing the module. So just to follow
Yes.
this internet where you find suitability according to your comprehension, that you can pick up. And if you pick up this particular module, it's very difficult. So therefore here, this exercise is again different, included with the different variables. The first one is stepping the staircase. The second one is running a distance. Then the third one is lifting a bunch, lifting from a bench press. Amount of kids that you can lift from a bench. And last one is number of push-ups. These are the various exercises that are included under exercise. That is also called as a factor, which is included with the first one is climbing the steps. The second one is running a distance. And the third one is lifting the various kids. And the fourth one is push-ups. These are the four variables that can be used for exercise purposes. And how this exercise influence the health. That is our concern. And again, health is divided into, that is, health is a set. Again, I'm telling you, my dear friend, health is a set which are having so many things, variables. Multivariate means multiple variables. And those multiple variables are under health. Again, I'm talking, exercise is a set with the multivariates. And health is also set with the multivariables. Just now I have mentioned which will come under this exercise. And now let us try to understand the variables that are included in health. Those are BP, blood pressure, cholesterol levels, glucose levels, body mass index. Body mass index. So how your exercise will influence the health in terms of blood pressure, cholesterol levels, glucose levels, and Body Index. And all those exercises, the types of exercises, we can call them as multivariates. Multivariants or variables. How these multivariants included in exercise will be having relationship with the other variable, that is health, which is again divided into 4 parts. That health may be a set which is having multivariables, and all those multivariables are just now mentioned. Your BP, your cholesterol, your glucose level, and Bose-Mali index. How these variables will be influenced or related with that of the exercises. That is the concern. That will be analyzed using canonical correlation analysis. Correlation means the relationship. And there are multivariate set of variables, multivariate sets of variables. Then how the relationship is existing between those sets of multivariate variables. For that purpose, you have to use canonical correlation analysis. Is it clear? Hello.
Yes,
There
sir.
are-
Clear, sir.
There are
Yes.
2 sets. One set is exercise, the other set is health. The exercise set is included with 4 variables, and the health set is included with 4 variables. Then we are trying to see how these 4 variables, which will come included under exercise, will influence or impact the other 4 variables which are included in health set. That is all about this canonical correlation analysis. So you have to understand multivariate sets of variables. Multivariate, that is the term that you are not supposed to forget. Multivariate sets and variables. And again, my dear friends, I should also inform you, like independent variables, there are other synonyms for dependent variables. The dependent variable can also be termed as, can also be responsive variables. We can also call it as responsive variables. Responsive variable which responds to the independent variables. We can also call it as a product variable. Yes. So that is about canonical correlation analysis, and let us try to understand what is conjoint analysis. Conjoint. Joint and conjoint. Joint itself indicates that they are joint or together. Still further, conjoint, which is completely bind, tightly done. A form of statistical analysis that will be used in the market to understand how customer value different components or features of their products or services. So this conjoint analysis is meant for, normally this is a market kind of research where the MBA people may be involved in doing this kind of researcher, and all these things are brought into this, MSc psychology also. Here what they do is, they try to understand how customer value different components or features of their products or services. How they understand or how the customer understands the value of different components or features of their products. If they want to purchase a product, then they try to understand the features of the components of that particular product. The example is, it's a very simple example, what exactly you are also doing in your life, and you might have purchased the TVs. Every house nowadays is connected with a TV. Huh? Is it not there on? Is it there?
Yes,
Are
sir.
you not having TVs?
No, sir. We have.
Ushaji, what is that type of TV that you have at your home?
Like flat screen, sir.
Smart Smart TV.
Yeah, smart TVs are there. That means TVs and every TV company has competition. Am I right or wrong? Every
Yes,
Yes.
TV competes with other TVs. Without competition, your product, cannot be saleable. Then you try to compare different TVs. That comparison based on the size or specific attributes. You are purchasing that product by following certain specific attributes such as size, brand, price of the TV. Don't you look at it?
Price, features.
Yeah, you are talking about the flat run, the size 42 inches, 50 inches, like that, isn't it? You may be having a
Yeah.
small theater also at your home, to my knowledge,
yes, sir.
some of you.
Yes, sir.
So for that purpose, here you are trying to understand the different attributes of that particular product while purchasing. For that purpose only, you try to use this conjoint analysis. The customer sees all these attributes or specific features. Specific features. Especially this can be used in your market research. So conjoint analysis emphasizes on the specific features or the attributes of the products. Why is it happening? Hello? Yeah. Hello? Yes.
Whiteboard somebody has accessed.
Whiteboard?
Hello.
Hello?
Somebody accessed
Yes, sir.
whiteboard, sir.
Is it okay now?
Yes,
Yes.
sir. It's okay.
So this is all about conjoint analysis. Now we are moving into cluster analysis. This is also again, this kind of analysis can be done in the market or the business or the trade. This is a trade analysis. To reduce a large data set to a meaningful subgroups of individuals or objects, this analysis will be used for reducing a large data set to a meaningful subgroups of individuals or objects. So there are many individuals. You can try to reduce a large data into meaningful subgroups. And there will be some kind of, rule would also, rule in the sense, some kind of, you follow certain norms. By following certain norms, you try to reduce the large data into subgroups, meaningful subgroups. The division is accomplished on the basis of similarity. Understand? Again, my dear friends, all
sir.
those objects are the human beings will be grouped into, will be grouped on the basis of the similarities. All tomatoes one group, all potatoes another group. Am I right or wrong?
Yes,
Market
sir,
people
right,
will be
sir.
doing this. There is a separate point for selling of
Good
tomatoes.
examples are easily understanding example.
It's very easy also. There are different points in the market where you find all these, products, isn't it? That means on the basis of the similarity, you are trying to subgroup the individuals or the objects. So the division is accomplished on the basis of similarity of the objects across a set of specified characteristics. So specified characteristics, those products which are having similar characteristics will be grouped one. That is a cluster. That means there are different objects which will be grouped with a specific character, similar characteristics. We can call it as cluster. You are dividing the data into subgroups, and each subgroup will be having similar characteristics. That characteristics or the subgroups having similar characteristics is known as cluster analysis. For this purpose, there are 4 main rules for developing clusters. The clusters should be different, isn't it? It should be different from other cluster. One cluster may be having similar products, another cluster may be having altogether a different kind of products. So the clusters should be different and should be reachable. They should be measurable. They should be profitable. On this basis only, the business people will organize the clusters to attract the customers. So at different points, you will find different clusters, isn't it? Here you will be available in a market. If you go there, products having similar characteristics is one market, one shop, and then be another shops which is meant for another kind of product, which is altogether different from the first cluster. Like this, there are different clusters, isn't it? So because their characteristics are almost similar, each group is having, subgroup is having similar characteristics. On that basis only, the clusters will be formed. And again, there are certain rules that are what I mentioned. The first one is clusters should be different. Each cluster should be different. And the clusters should also be reachable. Otherwise, nobody will go. If it is far, if it is quite far from a distance, then you may not go there. Am I right? People from Kukatpalli, madam is also on the screen. Kukatpalli, madam may not come to Kotapet for purchasing of that. The distance should not be too much also. So therefore, you try to see that distance is not that much too much, but there are different points which will be reachable within the reach of the people. So that kind of analysis is known as cluster analysis. Now let us move into multivariate analysis. Multivariate analysis, which we can call it as MANOVA. This will be used to analyze the difference between two or more groups when there are multiple dependent variables. Two or more groups when there are multiple dependent variables. Used to analyze the difference between two or more groups when there are multiple dependent variables. Example, measuring the correlation between the amount of time spent on social media and an employee's productivity. Example is the time that you are spending on social media and the employee's productivity. How much time they are spending on social media and what is their productivity. You are trying to see the difference. Time difference. So, time spent on social media and an employee's productivity. One can use MANOVA to test the statistical significance of effect of one or more independent variable on a set of two or more, and there should be categorical independent variables. Here, their requirement is categorical independent variables, two or more independent variables. So you can take different timings. The people who are using this social media for 2 hours, and there may be a group which would also be using the social media for about 3 hours a day, and then you relate those things with the productivity of the employees. How is the productivity or the product? How much production is happening? Because those people who are watching this social media for more time and less time. More time and less time, that's what I'm talking about. Categorical variables means more time who are spending on social media, and the other group is less time who are spending on social media. These are the two categorical kind of things, because social media is divided into two groups, two variables. That is, first one is who spend more time and who spend less time next one. So these will be compared, will be tried out to see how this particular productivity is happening. For that purpose only we can use this MANOVA, multivariate analysis of variance, but here the difference is you are using categorical variables, independent variables. For seeing the difference with the dependent variable. So here you are using categorical variable. That category just we have seen, more time spending, less time spending on social media, and how these things are related with that of the productivity of the employees. Productivity of the employees. If you spend more time on social media, I think there may be some fatigue factor. Am I right? There may be fatigue factor. Then you may not evince interest. By that way, your production will come down. And those people who will use less time for social media, their production may be up above this productivity of those people who are spending more time on social media. So try to see the difference, how this time, spending time on social media will influence the productivity. For that purpose, we are using this multivariate analysis of variance. So the variance in terms of production. Variance in terms of production, that can be studied with two variables, categorical variables. That is categorical variable, that more time spending on social media. The other one is less time spending on social media. This multivariate analysis of variance. And at the same time, my dear friends, you can also use this, especially when your children, how is their achievement, how much time they are using your smartphone, your mobiles. If you are giving the mobile to your child, how much time that boy is spending on social media. And there are parents who just give only less time to their children. And you can also compare these two groups of children with their achievement. Those people who spend less time on social media is supposed to have better achievement than the students whose achievement is less because of they're spending more time on social media. Their interest is on social media. Is it clear?
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Very nice. Let us move into the next one. Multi-dimensional scaling. Multi-dimensional scaling, because majority of the things, especially it seems, they are imported from this MBA syllabus, it seems. All these things will be included in MBA syllabus, not your MSc Psychology. Multi-dimensional itself indicates we are talking about the business. Multi-dimensional scaling, because you are scaling the distance between the multi-points. MDA, we can also call it as MDS, extends the scaling idea to more than one dimension. In the daily temperature use, we are using two dimensions. In the daily temperature, we are using two dimensions. What are those two dimensions? The temperature value and the day of that week. On which day you are observing the temperature. So what is the value of temperature? And on which day you are measuring that temperature, valuing the temperature. So this is one example that is quoted here. Anyway, this type of representation of quite natural because it can be easily displayed on a piece of paper. The distance can be, or the values can be Monday, this much temperature. Tuesday, this much temperature. Can we put it on the paper? Can't we? We can also this kind of recordings even on the screen also. Can't we see all these things on the screens? Computer screens?
Yes, sir. We can see, sir.
So therefore,
Sir,
here,
please explain the definition, sir, once again. Noting
it
down,
is
sir.
extended. MDS extends the scaling idea to more than one dimension. MDS extends. MDS is if you want, you can also write it. MDS is a visual representation of distances MDS, in other words, multi-dimensional scaling is a visual representation of distances or dissimilarities between sets of objects. Between sets of objects. That is the definition. MDS is a visual representation of distances or dissimilarities between sets of objects. And all these sets are included with objects. And what is the difference between one object to the other object? That can be scaled, that can be measured. Is it clear? It can be
Yes, sir.
represented. It can be represented or it can be scaled. It can be measured through a scale. The distance between one object to the other object, which are included in a set. For that purpose only, in order to scaling those things, we can use multi-dimensional scaling. So we can call it as a visual representation of distances or dissimilarities between sets of objects. Objects can be colors, objects can be faces, objects can be map coordinates. So MDs, this multi-dimensional scaling analysis starts with information about some form of dissimilarity between elements of a set of objects. Here you find dissimilarity in the objects of a set. If the set is included with objects and they are dissimilar, if they are dissimilar, what is the distance between these two objects? For measuring that or representing that, we can use this MDS. So visual representation of the distances between the objects of sets. We can use this multi-dimensional scaling. Scaling means you are measuring the distance of the dissimilar objects between the dissimilar objects. Between the dissimilar objects, objects are not similar. They are dissimilar. They vary in terms of color, in terms of facing, in terms of mapping and other things. So therefore, when they are different with regard to these things, they are dissimilar. So what is the distance between the dissimilar objectives? For that purpose, we can use this MDS, multi-dimensional scaling. Okay, now? In other words, we can also call it as geometric representation or geometric representation. You can take a scale, you can measure what is the distance between these dissimilar objects of a set. Next one is,
Excuse me, sir.
yeah, please.
Some examples, sir.
When the different products are included or objects included in a set having different colors, the color is not similar. Am I right? One color is here, another color is in another set or in the same set. If the color is different of a product in the same set, then what is the distance that is maintained between? That means they are dissimilar with regard to their color. Okay. One may be red color, the product, one product may be red, another product may be green. In terms of dissimilarity, the color is the factor. So what is the distance between these two objects which are included in a set? Like this, there will be so many objects in a set. So that kind of dissimilarity, it may be in terms of color, it may be in terms of other thing, not only by color. They are talking about the face. So if there's different faces of candidates that are included in the set, then what is the distance that can be measured using this multi-dimensional scaling? Multi-dimensional scaling means if there are different objects which are dissimilar in a set, we try to see the distance, we try to measure the distance. We can also represent that one. Graphically, we can represent, or geometrically, we can also measure by using the scale. So using the scale, you are trying to understand the distance. You are trying to measure the distance between the dissimilar objects which are included in a set. So for that purpose only, we can use this multiple dimensional scaling. Next one is, yeah, please, or otherwise, please, sir, please
Sir,
carry on.
excuse me, sir.
Yeah. What is
Some
it?
examples, sir. Oh, we want.
Just now I have given the example of it may be object, or it may be product, or it may be human beings also.
Examples for each.
Yeah.
Let's say. But
It's a business kind of, you just try to understand the business terms. If there are different products which are included in a set, in a shop, so the distance that is maintained from one object, because dissimilar to the base of the dissimilarity. So in order to represent that distance between dissimilar objects, we can use this multi-dimensional scaling. You are measuring the distance only. The object with one color, the object with a different color. The green color object may be there in the set. Similarly, the red color object may be included in the set. If these two things are there in a set, they are dissimilar. They are not similar in terms of color. So what is the distance between these two objects or products? That can be done using this particular multi-dimensional scaling. It's only measuring the distance. For measuring the distance of dissimilar objects which are placed at different points. For that purpose only, we can use dissimilar objects. That much only I can say, Dr. Garu. So dissimilar
Yes,
objectives, their distance between, what is the distance between those things can be represented using geometric kind of thing. Geometric in the sense scale is there. So what is the distance? How many meters these products are placed or displayed? How these products are displayed at what distance? That two dissimilar objects or the products. So for that purpose only,
sir,
I think this one.
Excuse me, can I add in here?
Please.
What I remember is like when you are saying similarity and dissimilarity.
Yeah,
And when we see the map, when we see the map of India map or some route maps, Sir Nageshwar Garu, whoever asked the question, I'm trying to say whether it is relatable or not. I don't know. When we see the
that
map,
is relatable also. He has given that kind of example in our module also.
Yeah, in the when we see the distance route map, maybe for example we have a plan to go to Delhi, and when we see it in the map, they give the measurement in a small scale, like 1.1 to 1. This is equal to 1,000 kilometers. Like that, they give a small scale, maybe 1 to 10 point, and each point is indication of 1,000 kilometers. Something like that. So, but the distance what we are seeing is very big, but here what they have represented is in a small scale. So,
hey, my dear friends, okay. You can also
okay,
go through some of the examples that are given in the internet also. I have given just only the objects or the products that are displayed at different points, and then you are trying to measure using geometrical kind of thing. For that purpose, we can use this multi-dimensional scaling. As madam said, mapping purposes also this can be.
Is that also okay?
Yes,
I'm asking you, sir.
Yeah, that is also okay. That is also example given somewhere also. That kind of example is also given somewhere. The purpose of embrace is to transform consumer judgments of similarity into distances represented in multi-dimensional space. That's what here it is mentioned in our module. So multi-dimensional space, different dimensions, the space having different dimensions. And here the purpose of embrace is to transform consumer judgments of similarity into distances represented in multi-dimensional space. In that particular space, so many things are displayed. Then for the purpose of judgment purposes, in order to find out the distance, judgments of similarity into distances. Here you are judging the distances. How much distance is there from one product to the other product. So for that purpose, it is given this multidimensional scaling, and you can also use that one. Then if there is any still further clarification, we can also discuss later. Now, what are the other things which are left out from this? Yes, principal
So multiple-
component analysis. Principal
sir.
component analysis, that's the only thing that is left out from this, I think. The other things are other analyses or covered. I believe I'm right or wrong?
Sir, multiple discriminant
Yeah,
analysis.
multiple discriminant
These two, sir.
analysis also. Yes, let us try to understand multiple discriminant analysis. It's meant for correctly classifying observations. Multiple discriminant analysis will be used for correctly classifying the observations or people into homogeneous groups. Is it clear? This particular analysis will be applied, used for correctly classifying observations or people into homogeneous groups. The independent variable must be metric and must have high degrees of normality. Hello, my dear friends. Independent variable must be metric. Metric means measurable. Measurable comes when there is a score. So independent variable, that is metric, means your intelligence score, that is metric. Your personality score is also metric. Therefore, what you are doing is, on the basis of these things, how many people have almost got equal IQs or having equal IQs? In terms of intelligence, that is a homogeneous group. In terms of IQs, those IQs which are very similar, which are very correct, isn't it? So that's the reason why here it is mentioned, your independent variables should have the metric. Metric in the score is a quantifiable in the sense that should be numerical. So your IQ is measurable using some kind of scale. So therefore, that should also be very normal. Again, I'm talking about in a normal probability curve. When all the scores are arranged in a normal probability curve or normal kind of data, then only this can be multiple discriminant analysis. It discriminates the data into high, middle, and low. Who are having high scores, who are having middle scores, average scores, and who are having the low scores also. It will discriminate, meant for correctly classifying observations or people into homogeneous groups. The independent variable must be metric and must have high degree of normality. Discriminant analysis builds a linear discriminant function which can then be used to classify the observations. So linear discriminant function. So when there is a linear discriminant function and those variables which will discriminate these things, the data, which will discriminate the data, for that purpose, multiple discriminant analysis will be used when the distribution is very, very normal. You can also take the means. Mean is the average, and who are below this mean and who are above the mean also. That way you are discriminating. So who are, in other words, who are very similar or common in terms of many things, which you can call it as a homogeneous group. The example is all the IQ candidates having similar IQ can also be grouped into one, which we can call it as homogeneous group with regard to intelligence. So intelligence is it is a independent variable metric because the score is there, quantified is there, quantification is there. Also metric means measurable. So that kind of independent variables which are normally done, which are the distribution is very normal, then only we can use this multiple discriminant analysis. So you can discriminate the data. You can discriminate the data or classify the data, especially the people, into homogeneous groups. It may be people or observations meant for correctly classifying, observations or people into homogeneous groups. I just given the example of this IQ. Similar IQ people may be grouped into one. That is a homogeneous group with regard to the IQ, because IQ is an independent variable that is measurable. So such kind of things, in order to correctly classify the people or the objects into homogeneous groups, we can use this multiple discriminant analysis. The next one is principal component analysis. Principal component analysis, or PCA, is a dimensionality reduction method that is often used to reduce the dimensionality of large data sets by transforming a large set of variables into a smaller one that still contains most of the information in the large set. So if a large data is given, I think we have seen factorial analysis, am I right? This is quite opposite to that one, if I'm right.
Sir, please repeat the definition, sir.
Yes, this is the dimensionality. So this analysis is the dimensionality reduction method. Dimensionality reduction method that is often used to reduce the dimensionality of large data sets by transforming a large set of variables into a smaller one. Smaller, don't you think this is almost with that factorial analysis? When the data is too much, it's a large data, your large data is reduced to a smaller data by considering the variables into a smaller one. Am I right? Large set of variables into a smaller one by transforming a large set of variables into a smaller one. So therefore, it's a dimensionality reduction method. Dimensional, because if the data is too much, dimension is very high, you cannot control or manage it, then what you have to do is, using this principal component analysis, what you do, you reduce the dimensionality of large data sets by transforming a large set of variables into a smaller one that still contains many of the information in the large set. So here, essentially, principal component analysis is one sample technique applied to data with no groupings among the observations. So here you are not groupings. All the linear combinations that we have considered previously were related to other variables or to the data structure. In regression, we have linear combinations of the independent variables that best predict the dependent variables. In canonical correlation, we have linear combinations of a subset of variables that maximize the correlate with the linear combinations of another subset of variables. So linear combinations means if one variable goes up, the other variables will also travel on the same lines. That is what we call it as linear correlation. So linear correlation means it's a question of if one variable changes that are going up, similarly that change will also occur in other variable. So that is known as the linear variable, and he is talking about our canonical correlation, which is more or less equivalent to that. The principal component analysis, we seek to maximize the variance of a linear combination of the variables. So in order to get this linear combination, variance of a linear combination of the variables, we seek to maximize that variance. We can use this principal component analysis. For example, we might want to rank students on the basis of their scores on achievement tests in English, mathematics, reading, and so on. An average scores would provide a single scale on which to compare the students, but with unequal weights, we can spread the students out further on the scale and obtain a better ranking. You go to this kind of example if you have any doubt. Principal component analysis is that will maximize the variance of linear combination of the variables. And the example is, if you want to rank students on the basis of their scores on achievement tests in English, mathematics, reading, and so on, an average score would provide a single scale on which to compare the students. Can't we compare by taking the average, the below average and above average, like that? So this is the principal component analysis for which this is example. But anyway, I think still you require some more explanation for this principal component analysis. And you have also mentioned this. Somebody was asking the example of multi-dimensional scaling also. We can also discuss later. And for this, these are the multivariate analysis techniques. I think we have covered all these techniques. Multiple regression analysis. And among all these techniques, what is important for you is the first one, multiple regression analysis. Normally we use in education research and psychological research. And most of the other techniques that we use come under the business, in the sense most of business courses and other MBA courses, there they will use all these things because they are useful for business purposes, for analysis of their data. And most importantly, what you have to do is just go with this multiple regression analysis, where you find more number of independent variables with that of dependent variables. And in that, you are trying to understand the contribution of each independent variable, and also you are able to understand the contribution of all the independent variables to the dependent variable. So you can predict the variance in the dependent variable by using this multiple regression analysis. That's okay. And other things are okay, but you have some confusion with regard to multi-dimensional scaling and the principal component analysis, which we can discuss with better examples tomorrow. Okay, na? Is it okay? Because there is some kind of confusion with regard to these things. Is it okay? Nirupa, Naupa,
Sir, any
Deepa?
example for multiple regression analysis, sir?
Your
Or we
achievement.
can mention,
Yeah.
or we can mention in education and psychological research, sir.
Yeah. For example, I tell you in education also,
Okay, sir.
achievement
Yes, sir.
is there. Achievement, for example, you have your psychology, am I right?
Yes, sir.
You have the practicals,
Yes,
and
sir.
you have also theory.
Yes, sir.
Both put together, you get the total achievement, am I right?
Yes, sir.
These are the dependent variables.
Okay,
Your
sir.
achievement in theory, achievement in practicals, and then total achievement. These are the three dependent variables.
Okay, sir.
And each of these three dependent variables can also be analyzed by the independent variables. Each dependent variable can also be analyzed using the independent variables with 2 or more independent variables also. Say, for example, if there are 16 personality factors, these are independent variables. 16 personality factors. Use all these 16 personality factors on your achievement in theory. So how many of these 16 personality factors are able to explain more variance on your achievement in theory? And which variable is able to explain more variance? That can also be found out. Which variable is able to contribute more? That is possible by using this multiple regression analysis. Okay, na? Is it okay now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this can be used in our psychological issues, also education issues. These are some of the multiple, techniques of multiple analysis, techniques of multivariate analysis. So techniques of multivariate analysis, there are about 9 techniques which are mentioned for your syllabi, and where you have seen some of these things, but there is some clarity which is required for multi-dimensional scaling. You are talking about examples, and also we can also discuss principal component analysis. Principal component means the main component. Principal component means the main component that can be reduced into variables. So many variables, how they large data will be seen by attaching it to many variables. That way, I think you are reducing the data. By way of spreading that data into different variables. So the large data is again transformed into small data by way of the variables, by using so many variables. That way the large data can be reduced to small data by way of using more number of variables. So that much, which principal variable can contribute more, that we can also understand using this principal component analysis. Then this is all about the different techniques that we can use for analysis of the data with regard to techniques of multivariate analysis. And again, there is another very tough kind of topic that is coming up for discussion. That is, I don't like to give you trouble by going through this completely to your module related to this techniques of qualitative analysis, because there are certain things which you cannot understand also. It's very difficult unless you have some other way of understanding this. You can some other reference material is required to understand this also. Right, my dear friends? Techniques of qualitative analysis. This is unit number 20. Normally, this qualitative analysis in psychology is very less. Qualitative researches are very less. Qualitative research in psychology are very less. Most of the cases you find only quantitative research, except your case study, which will come under qualitative analysis. You are describing the data. When you are describing the data, the qualities of the data, the traits of the data, here you are using the qualitative analysis. So therefore, many studies are not available. Normally, they don't try this qualitative research for psychological issues, more with the quantitative analysis or quantitative research. You find quantitative researches more than qualitative researches, and their number is very limited. That too, your case study is an example for qualitative analysis, especially for psychology purposes. So very limited studies are available on qualitative analysis with regard to your subject. Okay? Then under this, you are supposed to understand how to analyze this qualitative data. What are the various techniques? Number one is you have to collect the data using, I think already we have discussed some of these things in the earlier chapters. Qualitative data collection through different methods. We can use observation, we can use biographies, we can use focus group interviews, also in-depth interviews. We can also recordings, also use mass media output, documentaries, and internet sources for collecting the data with regard to qualitative research. So qualitative research data can be gathered by using all these methods, and some of these methods are also discussed by us in the earlier chapters. Anyway, for the benefit of those people who are just joining today, for them, the data can be collected, or even for qualitative research. We can use observations, we can use the biographies, also focus group interviews method, in-depth interviews, recordings of conversations, and also mass media output. If necessary, you can take Also documentaries and historical records. You can also go through the records. And then also internet sources. By using all these methods, you can collect the data for your qualitative research. Then the next one is thematic analysis. So based on your problem, you have to use all these things. Then thematic problem is thematic analysis. So thematic analysis is one of the components or the techniques that are included in our qualitative analysis. So the first one is data collection. That data collection by using different methods. By the way, you can also analyze using those methods, which I refer to, the observation and other things. And also thematic analysis. The second one is thematic analysis. Under this, you are transcribing the textual data. Text means it may be the interview. Text here you have to understand in terms of the interviews, the opinions, etc. Text means here in this qualitative analysis, for the purpose of this thematic analysis, you have to understand that the text is the information that you are getting out of the interview, which is transcribed. The interaction will be transcribed, will be made a script with the words, which we can call it as text. So you are transcribing that particular interview or the interaction, which we can call it as textual data, and also analytic effort. So analytic effort means this refers to the amount of work or processing that the researcher applies to the text in order to generate the final themes. So during the time of interviews, you are trying to understand the individual from different angles. So you are trying to collect the themes out of that interaction. Themes means it's a topics or the issues on which is focusing. We can call them as themes. The keywords, key issues, or the issues that are repeatedly mentioned by the participant during the time of interview. Then if you can relate all these things, you can get some theme out of that interaction. He may be talking about social issues, health issues may be talking about, or social issues such as child marriage he may be talking about, or some other problems related to society. So he may be talking about all those things. So if you can understand the key points of that interview, we can call them as the texts, which are converted into a data, textual data. The interaction is recorded and that is completely arranged in terms of the script, which we can call it as text. This has to be observed. This has to be studied. Whatever the interaction or the conversation that has happened between the interviewer and the interviewee, that has to be recorded and that has to be presented before yourself. And then you have to analyze what are the various issues that are highlighted. Those issues may be the key points, key or the focus on certain issues. Just now I have mentioned, he may be mentioning about his personal problems. He may be suffering with some kind of anxiety problem or distress or some kind of, other problem that he's facing. So he may be repeating all those things during the time of the interviewer. Before the interviewer, he will explain or he will interact, and more number of times those things may be repeated. So I think from that you have to understand these are the key issues that this fellow is having. Those issues we can call it as the themes. Then the analytic effort is that the process of becoming increasingly familiar with the text so that understanding can be achieved and is not based on partial knowledge of the data. The process of becoming increasingly familiar with the text so that understanding can be achieved. The better understanding is possible when you look at the data number of times. So it's a question of familiarity. You have to read it from different angles. Whatever that you have collected as a result of your interview or discussion, then you come you can come with that recording kind of thing, which is transcribed into a text that you have to place before yourself. Then you have to analyze it in different angles, so that familiarity will come up. And just at sudden, in the first attempt of your understanding, you may not get complete picture. In the second, still you read the data. Still, third time you read the data. By that, you try to fuse all those key words or key factors which are mentioned in that particular interview. Those things will become the themes or the issues. On that basis, to try to understand the individual. So this is called thematic identification of themes and sub-themes. And if you read it number of times, repeat it number of times, when they're related, when they're interdependent, all these key points, then you can also get some kind of idea. And this is the issue that he is suffering with, which we can call them as themes. So by knowing all these themes, you try to give some kind of, your research is meant for giving some kind of solution. It may be health issue, or it may be social issue, or it may be some other issue, and all these issues will be disclosed during the time of interview. Then the next one is grounded theory. Actually, this is not the technique of understanding the individuals. Actually, this is the theory. That means grounded theory means you are collecting the data by placing yourself in the field itself. You are living with the people, staying with the people, then sleeping with the people, eating with the people. Then only familiarity comes. Otherwise, they will not disclose what they are, what you are trying to understand. You cannot understand unless you completely immerse yourself with that particular life. Ethnographic studies. You might have heard about the ethnographic studies. What is ethnographic studies? Ethnographic studies. There are certain ethnic groups which are quite away. Their language is different. Their lifestyle is different. When these things are completely different, if you want to conduct a research to understand that particular ethnic groups, then you should also understand their language. Otherwise, you cannot. And moreover, at the first instance, you will not be allowed into that particular ethnic group because you are a stranger. Then you have to take the help of those people who have relations with that kind of ethnic groups only. So I think these things have to be taken care of when you talk about this grounded theory. That means you are collecting the data with regard to the people, especially with their culture. If you want to understand their culture, then you have to collect the data by placing yourself, then by moving with them, and then, of course, communicating with them in their language. Then only it will be possible for you to understand what they are, what that particular group is. So this is also ethnic studies. Ethnographic studies will come under qualitative analysis. Normally, these things will be used in the social anthropological studies. So there are many things which are included. Those things are comparison. So these things, whatever that you have gathered, have to be compared. Today it may be, it's okay. Tomorrow it may also be changed. Whatever he said, is he able to do it? That is what comparison. And it will also change what he said today. May not be the same tomorrow. So for that purpose, I think comparison is also required. That is credibility of the data. In order to get that credible data, you are supposed to have this kind of comparison. Then you should also give the coding of your exercises or the efforts. Whatever that you are doing every day, the work that you are doing has to be coded. And then whatever that is coded has to be categorized. Categorized. Then you have to say this is the thing that is categorized. So on the basis of the coding, you are categorizing the various issues. Categorizing the various issues, and day-to-day activity of yours has to be coded. Each sentence has to be coded, or it may be paragraph may be coded. Whatever that is read by you, whatever that is studied by you with regard to the particular group has to be coded. That's meant for, arranging all those things that will be useful for arranging the data serially, one after another. For that purpose only that coding is also given. And also memorizing. All these things have to be, the data has to be noted down. The researcher notes suggestions as to how the categories may be linked together in the sense they have relationships and interdependencies. So after having the classification, the coding is there, that is over. Then you have classified the data. Then you are trying to understand the relationships or interdependency of different things among the people. Interdependency or the relationships that are existing in that particular group that you are trying to understand by way of classification. Then the theoretical sample, whatever that you observe, and again that has to be tested in some other group. So for establishing the validity of your data, that has to be repeated. So when the data is repeated, we can call it as theoretical sampling, isn't it? That means validity of the sample. For that purpose, you have to test the data in other sample also. Theoretical sample is about how to validate the ideas developed within the memo. So whatever the relationship, the interdependencies, all these issues have to be again tested. That kind of testing is meant for validating the data, which will come under theoretical sampling. Next one is literature review. So qualitative data technique, that means under this grounded theory, what we are trying to understand is literature. We will also review the literature, whether there is any relation between the earlier studies and all to the present study. Was there any mention which were conducted earlier? Is there any relationship with the data that I have collected today and the data that was collected by other researchers earlier? For that purpose only, we are trying to check and recheck to compare your data, whether the same thing have the similarities or not. For that purpose, you are trying to understand the literature. You are going to the literature, especially past research studies related to your study that you are trying to understand by way of comparing the results of your study or the data with that of the other researcher which were conducted earlier. Next one is discourse analysis. So we are all talking about discourses. Discourse means discourse. What shall we say? And also implies speech act theory. Discourse means how language operates in real life communication. How language operates, discourse analysis. Whenever we talk about, whenever there is a talk, discourse is how language operates in real life communication of events. So when there are events, then how our language communicates will come under discourse. Discourse analysis studies language in ways where different from traditional linguistics. We are not going into the origin of the language, my dear friends. That is linguistics. Origin of the language will come under linguistics, but we are not going into it. But our interest is how this language operates in real life communication when there are events. When there are different events, how the language in real life communication, how the language operates. So that we can discuss under discourse analysis. Under that, we can also see the speech acts. Speech is meant for doing, isn't it? Speech is meant for doing. Saying the words constitutes an utterance act or locator act. They constitute, there are different terms that are used under speech act. If you are interested, you can also go through that. And these things are not necessary. To my understanding, what is very important thing is how the speeches will change the people. How our language operates in our day-to-day life activities. By understanding that particular language, how it is operating in our real life situations, there lies the role of the researcher to understand the impact of that particular discourses. To understand the discourses, how the language operates in the real life events. For that purpose, I think he has to understand that particular kind of thing. And for that purpose, we are talking about this, which is known as a discourse analysis. So under this, speech act is the speech is meant for acting. And again, maxims of cooperative speech That maxim is a rule-based nature of exchanges. Maxims means rule-based nature of exchanges. So there are certain rules which they have to follow it while communicating. So when the speech is there, you are supposed to use certain rules. So those things which come under maxims, rule-based nature of exchanges between people are called as maxims that are to be studied also. If you want to study the people, how the maxims between the people, how are they able to follow this? How are they able to impact the people? Rule-based nature of exchanges. So those things are known as maxims that can also be studied, and also phase. The phase, in other words, we can call it as possible version of people which are to be accepted. I feel that my conversation or my words should be respected, should be accepted. That is known as phase. Am I right? The best possible version of themselves in social interactions in order to gain acceptance from others. So your version has to be accepted. Then you try to promote your words or your versions. Am I right? So the notion of phase is taken from the work of Goffman to indicate the valued person that individual have. Valued person. So which face value means, I think you quite often use the face value. Just by looking at the face, you try to get some kind of impression, isn't it? So whatever the versions of these people, and they have this tendency of that has to be accepted by the other people. That have the tendency, my version should be accepted. So these things should also be studied in the qualitative analysis. And also register. Register means style of communication. So style of communication, how they use different styles of communication. Lecturing method, attempt discussion. Today, I speak differently. If I'm the sermon is being different. Lecture is different. The language used in a lecture is not the same as that used when a sermon is being given. So therefore, whatever the language that you are using, that differ from one event to another. If I'm giving lecture, my speech will be different. If somebody is doing some other activity, that would be different. So it is contextual way of things, languages. I use the language for communication purpose at different style, using different styles. I may be here, assertive kind of communication I may use. I may not use the same kind of communication before my children or in some other event. It may differ. So how all these things will differ, which we call it as register. And then finally, practices and resources. Discourse analysis. My time, I think I may be completing. What is the timer? Yes. 120 already my time. Yes. Finally, properties and resources. Discourse analysis is not simply an approach to the social use of language. It focuses on discourse practices, the things that people do in talk and writings. So the practices of the people, whatever the speaker, are they able to put into practice or not? That should also be analyzed. So these things have to be analyzed, and these are the various techniques for analyzing the qualitative data. So qualitative data has to be analyzed from different angles. The first one is by using different methods, and also the thematic analysis. You have to collect the themes during the interviews, and also to collect the data from the field by going through all the steps that you have discussed in grounded theory. That means you are this is above the ground. This is ground up kind of data. Whatever that you are collecting the data from the ground, you are uploading the data, uploading the data to the people concerned for taking action. So you are collecting the data from the ground that you are sending it to the other person who is at the other level for taking decision. For that purpose only you are doing this kind of analysis. Here you are not finding any kind of numericals or quantification. Mostly this is completely description. So discourse analysis, how the speech acts in the day-to-day life activities that you have to observe. Then conversation analysis. So during their conversations, how the things are taking place, that we have to understand, isn't it? So all these things have to be considered whenever we talk about this qualitative data analysis, conversation analysis. When there is a conversation, how he or she is behaving, that has to be understood. So participants' contribution in regard the product of the sequence of turns. Turns means contributions, proceeding it in the conversation. So contributions in the conversations that needs analysis. So the turns, TURNS, turns means contributions. These contributions, whenever there is conversation, that contributions have to be observed or analyzed if you want to get the clear picture of that personal objectives. So this is all about the techniques that you can use for analyzing the data. I'm sorry I have taken 5 or 6 minutes, and tomorrow I thought that I would complete more of this, at least the other one, but I could not do it because I have spent much of time on this, the other issues for multivariate data analysis. We spend much of our time on that. And this is all about the data analysis regarding the qualitative research. Whenever the qualitative research has to be taken up, but you find only limited studies using qualitative research. But if you are interested to take up qualitative researches, and that qualitative researches has to consider all these techniques to get the crystal clear picture of the human beings with regard to their life. That is all about for this. Thank you very much. That's all about for today's class. Tomorrow we can finish the other chapters, and the dates and of course there are certain doubts that you have mentioned, some examples you wanted. We can also discuss those examples with regard to some dates. Dr. Saab has also mentioned that is something distance, am I right? Multi-dimensional scaling. There he wanted to throw some examples for that. And also the other one is principal kind of, something. Yeah. There you require one example or two examples for that. And rest of the other topics that we can finish as much as we can do it. Nothing should be left out. And then we have, of course, that's all about for tomorrow's class and today for this. Thank you very much. That's all about for today's class. Already I have taken.
Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, my dear friends, please. Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
What
sir.
you
Yes,
have
sir.
to do is please refer to other books. Please don't refer. I cannot say refer, but this very tough kind of language that is also given in our module, especially for these things, whatever that I discussed, these 2 units. Please go through the other material available on these 2 units.
Okay, sir.
Because it's really
Okay, sir.
a little bit difficult to understand these topics. So I think you can have this kind of material in the net also. You can get more number of examples, very known examples, and you cannot, we need not cite the foreign examples for this purpose. So therefore, kindly go to the material that is available in the internet with regard to these 2 units. That's all about for this class. Thank you very much.
Sure, sir. Thank you,
Now-
sir.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot for today.